In 2007, Apple launched the first iPhone and quietly started a software revolution. Since then, iOS has evolved from a simple touch interface into one of the most powerful mobile platforms on earth. So let's see how iOS has evolved over the years. iPhone OS 1 2007. The original iPhone launched with what Apple simply called iPhone OS. At the time, most phones relied on physical keyboards and styluses. Apple replaced all of that with a fully touch based interface powered by multi touch gestures. Pinching to zoom, swiping through photos, and smooth scrolling suddenly felt natural. It also shipped with core apps like Safari, Mail, Calendar, Contacts, and YouTube, establishing the basic smartphone experience we still use today. But something huge was still missing: iPhone OS 2 2008. A year later, Apple introduced one of the most important features in smartphone history: the App Store. At launch, it had only about 500 apps, but it opened the door for third party developers to build software for the iPhone. Today, the App Store hosts millions of apps and games, turning the iPhone into a platform rather than just a device. iPhone OS 3 2009. The third version added features users had been asking for since day one. This included copy paste, MMS, spotlight search, and video recording for the camera. It was also the first version designed to work with the iPad, which would launch the following year. iOS 4 2010. With version 4, Apple officially renamed the system from iPhone OS to iOS. This update introduced several major features: multitasking, folders on the home screen, FaceTime video calls on the iPhone 4. Apple also introduced AirPlay and AirPrint, allowing wireless streaming and printing. The iPhone was becoming far more capable with this. iOS 5 2011. iOS 5 introduced one of the most recognizable Apple features. First was iCloud, allowing photos, contacts, and files to sync automatically across devices. Then came iMessage, Apple's internet based messaging platform. But the most famous addition was Siri, Apple's voice assistant. For the first time, users could control their phones simply by speaking. iOS 6 2012. This update introduced Apple Maps, replacing Google Maps as the default navigation app. The launch was controversial because the maps initially had accuracy problems. Despite the rough start, Apple continued improving it over the years. iOS 6 also added Passbook, now known as the Wallet app, along with Do Not Disturb, panorama photography, and camera filters. iOS 7 2013. iOS 7 delivered the largest design overhaul in the history of the iPhone. Apple abandoned the old skeuomorphic design with textures and realistic elements and replaced it with a clean, flat interface. This version also introduced Control Center, AirDrop, Touch ID. The iPhone suddenly looked and felt completely different. iOS 8 2014. iOS 8 expanded Apple's ecosystem. It introduced Apple Pay, enabling contactless payments from the iPhone. It also launched the Health app, iCloud Drive, and family sharing, allowing purchases and subscriptions to be shared by family members. Apple was building a broader digital ecosystem around the iPhone. iOS 9 2015. iOS 9 focused heavily on performance and productivity. The update introduced low power mode to extend battery life and night shift, which reduces blue light at night. On the iPad, Apple added true multitasking features like split view and picture in picture, turning the tablet into a more serious productivity device. iOS 10 2016. iOS 10 redesigned the lock screen and introduced richer notifications and widgets. Apple also introduced iMessage, adding stickers, effects, and third party apps. Another big change: users could finally delete many built in Apple apps which they couldn't do earlier. Siri also became powerful by opening access to developers. iOS 11 2017. iOS 11 pushed the iPad further into productivity territory. The new Files app allowed users to manage documents like on a computer. Apple also introduced drag and drop, making multitasking much easier. Another major addition was Arcade, Apple's framework for augmented reality apps. iOS 12 2018. iOS 12 focused on performance and digital well being. Apple introduced screen time, allowing users to monitor and control how much they use their phone. Notifications were redesigned and grouped more intelligently. The update also introduced Memoji, animated avatars based on your own face. iOS 13 2019. One of the most requested features finally arrived: dark mode. This update also improved privacy with stronger location permissions and introduced sign in with Apple, a more secure login option for apps. At the same time, Apple split the software into iOS for iPhone and iPadOS for iPad. iOS 14 2020. iOS 14 brought the biggest personalization upgrade since iOS 7. For the first time, users could place widgets directly on the home screen. Apple also added the App Library, which automatically organizes apps. Picture in picture video, pinned conversations in messages, and a compact call interface also arrived. iOS 15 2021. iOS 15 focused on communication and productivity. Focus mode allowed users to filter notifications depending on their activity. FaceTime received major upgrades, including spatial audio and portrait effects. The Photos app gained live text, letting users copy text directly from images. iOS 16 2022. iOS 16 introduced something iPhone users had wanted for years: lock screen customization. Users could change fonts, colors, and widgets directly on the lock screen. Messages also gained the ability to edit or unsend text, and Apple continued improving Maps and Apple Pay. iOS 17 2023. iOS 7 introduced standby mode, which turns the iPhone into an information display while charging. Widgets became interactive, allowing users to control apps directly from the home screen. Apple also introduced Name Drop, making it easy to share contact information by simply bringing two iPhones close together. iOS 18 2024. iOS 18 marked the beginning of Apple's AI era with the introduction of Apple Intelligence. Users gained far more customization, including free placement of apps and widgets, tinted icons, and a redesigned control center. Apple also launched the Passwords app, bringing all login credentials into a single secure location. iOS 26 2025. With iOS 26, Apple introduced a new naming system aligned with the year of use. The update also debuted a redesigned interface called Liquid Glass, featuring translucent elements and more dynamic visuals. Apple expanded Apple Intelligence with features like live translation, call screening, and AI powered audio mixing. Core apps including camera, messages, and photos were redesigned, while CarPlay gained live activities and tap back reactions. Adaptive power mode also improved battery efficiency. If you enjoyed this video, you would also really enjoy this other one I made about iPhone evolution. Click on it, I'm sure you'll enjoy. Also hit like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next one.